Thank you for joining me for episode 2 of the Quotes, Light, and Motivation podcast. I updated the name of the podcast to Quotes, Light, and Motivation, just to get more specific on the purpose of the podcast. As I mentioned in episode 1, the review quotes. The reason I added light into the name of the podcast is because that is what I'm trying to bring to these quotes. So as we review these different quotes, I want to see how can we use this information and bring light and positive energy to the world, to our lives, to our daily living, so that, we can make things a little more positive in the world that we're living in. So yeah, that's the new name, Quotes, Light, and Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, William H. I have a great quote for us today, a quote that I'm sure many of you have already heard before, but we're going to dive into it a little bit more and dive a little bit more deeper into it. So let's go into the quote. The quote is, "The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes." End quote. And that quote is by Charles Swindoll. It's a powerful quote. I'm sure many of you have heard the portion that I want to focus on in this episode. The last two sentences I want to focus on there. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. Again, that quote is by Charles Swindoll. So I want to dive into a little bit about who Charles Swindoll is. Charles Swindoll was born October 18th, 1934. He is an evangelical Christian pastor, author, educator, and radio preacher. He founded Insight for Living, headquartered in Frisco, Texas, which airs a radio program of the same name on more than 2,000 stations around the world in 15 languages. He is currently the senior pastor at Stonebriar Community Church in Frisco, Texas. We'll cite Wikipedia with that information on Charles Swindoll. I want to talk for a second about the last portion of that quote. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. Is attitude really that important? Is it really 90% of life? 90%, that's high. 90%. 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. I would agree that attitude is that important. That the way that you approach any situation can determine whether the situation is successful or if it fails. Whether you have a positive outlook on it, whether you go into the situation with a positive outlook or with the right attitude can determine whether or not you're successful, right? And that's with anything. A lot of times people will say, it's not what you said, it's how you said it, right? Because that's how important it is, how we say things, what type of attitude we bring to situations and things that we face. So I think it is that important. I think it is 90%. I agree with this quote that it is 90%. 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. So if attitude is that important, how can we improve our attitudes as we go through life and we face situations at school, at work, on our jobs and in our businesses, etc.? How can we improve our attitude? I've heard people say that And even I've learned that who you spend time with makes up a good portion of how you act. You know, you get around a group of people, and they have an effect on you, right? You get around your friends, it has a different effect on how you act versus when you're around family. You know, you act differently at work versus when you're at home. It's just natural. It's normal, to react differently in different spaces. So if you want to improve your attitude, I think that's one of the things that we can do. We can spend time with people who have a positive attitude, right? If you want to be positive and improve your attitude, you don't want to spend time with people who are always complaining and always have something negative to say, always looking for the worst in situations, always looking for some reason to complain or some reason to argue, you know. Spend time with those that have a positive attitude if you're trying to improve your attitude. Another thing we can do, we can forgive those who have wronged us or that we feel have wronged us, you know. A lot of times we put people on pedestals or we have certain expectations of people. A lot of times we have certain expectations of people. And when those expectations aren't met, you know, we can be disappointed, have anger, you know, have a bad attitude about the situation that we're facing, the results of the situation. If you forgive those people for what they've done to you or with a situation or whatever, it'll help to improve your attitude. I believe it'll help to improve your attitude. So forgive the limitations of others. You may have had certain expectations of people to react a certain way or act a certain way, and they were not met. Don't hang on to that anger that you feel about the situation or disappointment you have in the situation. Of course, it's easier said than done, right? It's easy to say, you know, forgive. It's easy to say to forgive people, but it's harder to do. So some situations may require longer time for you to forgive. But if you want to get to that point where you are able to forgive so that it's not affecting you and you're able to let it go. I heard someone say that just because you forgive someone doesn't mean that you forget. So just because you forgive something, it doesn't mean that, you know, it doesn't mean that the relationship doesn't change just because you're forgiving someone. You still are aware of, you know, what happened, and you react accordingly and you proceed accordingly, but you forgive, you let it go. Another thing that we can do to improve our attitudes is to don't compare ourselves to others. I think this is a big one, you know, not to compare yourself to others. In this day and age that we're living in with social media and, you know, everyone's happy. There's a quote or a rap lyric that says, "I'm only showing you the highlights." And that's what social media is. It's just the highlights, right? For the most part. I mean, most people on social media only show you the good things. They don't show you, you know, the bad things or the mundane. It's always the extravagant, the extremely positive things, right, that we see on social media for the most part. So, you know, that's a hard thing to not compare yourself to others when you're bombarded by all these images of perfection and positivity and, you know, everything is great on social media. It's something you have to work on to not compare yourself. To be grateful of where you are right now in your life. To be grateful of all the things that you've accomplished up to this point. That's something I struggle with. A lot of times I don't celebrate my accomplishments. And that's something you should definitely take some time to do. I've heard of people even doing gratefulness journals every day, waking up and writing things that they're grateful for to start their day. I think that can help to bring a positive attitude in our daily lives. Another thing we can do to improve our attitude is to expect the best out of every situation. So don't go into a situation expecting the worst. Expect that things will go well. Expect that you will succeed. Expect that things will go well. Expect that you'll get the outcome that you're striving for. There's a certain level of confidence with that to expect the best out of every situation. And although you may not get the best out of every situation, it's better to, I think, expect that. Don't go in a situation feeling like you're not going to get what you're asking for, feeling like you can't accomplish what you want to accomplish in a situation. You have to go into it with a positive outlook. You go into a situation acting as if what you're striving for is what you're going to get. Acting as if it's already accomplished. It's already done. That can improve your approach. That can improve the reaction of whoever you're working with. Just an example of that is, at work, if you're given a task that you've never done before, although you've never done it, go into that situation with a positive attitude, knowing that you can do the task, knowing that you can take the steps to get the knowledge to learn how to do the task. Another way to improve your attitude is to wake up early. As crazy as it sounds, especially in these times, a lot of folks are working from home. I think it's important to get up early. It's something I struggle with, definitely. But when I do get up early and I take some time for myself before, I start working or, I run out the house, my day is just much better. It improves my attitude, improves my outlook on life, and improves everything. I feel like I have accomplished a lot, before the day has even started. If you get up, before, hour or two before you start work, for example, when you spend some time getting your thoughts together before you start work, that improves your attitude. That's a way you can improve your attitude. You meditate, you read, whatever you may do. You may work out, you may go for a walk, you may go for a bike ride, but you spend some time with yourself before the stress of the world is on you, right? Before, your boss is asking you for something, your spouse is asking you for something, your kids are asking you for something. Just spending that time with yourself can help you improve your attitude. So these are just a few items that we can do to improve our attitude and things to keep in mind. What's something that you can implement this week to improve your attitude? What's something that you're facing that you can approach with a better attitude and go into it with a positive attitude? And it may affect the outcome. So those are some of the things I want us to think about this week. The quote again is, I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. Have a good week.